أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. This is our 7th episode of our lessons on Introduction to Rijal Studies. In our last discussion, we left off by talking about the later scholars of Ilm al-Rijal. Are they reliable? Are they not reliable? Can we depend on them when it comes to Ilm al-Rijal or not? We saw that Sayyid al-Khoi and some of his students, they took a strong position stating that we cannot rely on later jurists or later scholars of Ilm al-Rijal. And that is because they're mujtahids. They don't have a way of discerning for sure who is reliable and who is not reliable from the narrators and the transmitters. We refuted this theory and we said that the reason why we refer to scholars of Rijal is because they are experts. It's because of their expertise. And this doesn't make a difference between the pioneers of Ilm al-Rijal or the later scholars of Ilm al-Rijal. As long as both groups are deemed as experts, we may refer to them. We also talked about Al-Allam al-Hilli, who is one of the later scholars, and his reliance upon Rijal ibn al-Ghada'iri. And we said that Rijal ibn al-Ghada'iri is problematic because the sons of Ibn al-Ghada'iri, they destroyed his books after his death. So how could his books have reached Al-Allam al-Hilli 200 years later? So we had a problem with that. Now I'd like to continue the discussion regarding Al-Allam al-Hilli. There's another problem with Al-Allam al-Hilli according to Sayyid al-Khoi. Sayyid al-Khoi doesn't rely on Al-Allam al-Hilli for two reasons. One is because he's a later jurist, he's a later scholar, and the later scholars, they themselves rely on the former scholars. So if they rely on the former scholars, why don't we just go directly to the former scholars? This is one problem, and we already talked about this in the previous lecture. The second problem, according to Sayyid al-Khoi, is that Al-Allam al-Hilli, when he looks at the lives of the different narrators and different transmitters, if they are imamis, ithna asharis, and nothing bad has been said about them, there's nothing bad about them, then he considers them reliable, udul. In other words, according to Al-Allam al-Hilli, every Shi'i, every Imami Ithna Ashari, by default is adil. He's reliable. Not is he just reliable, but he's just. You could accept his testimony. You could even pray behind him. Right? Adala. By default, everyone is adil, unless proven otherwise. While Sayyid al-Khoi disagrees. He says no. By default, no one is adil. And no one is da'if either, weak. So by default, any human being, whether it's a transmitter or not a transmitter, you're neither good nor you're bad. To be good, you need proof. To be bad, you need proof. So any of these given transmitters, narrators, should we accept them or should we not accept them? So the Khoi says, we don't know. To accept them, we need enough proof that they are reliable, that they are thiqa, that they are adil. We don't say they're unreliable. We can't say that they're weak or unreliable or untrustworthy. No, we don't know. And as long as we don't know, we can't rely on them. He says, but Al-Allam al-Hilli, for him, by default, everyone's reliable. As long as he's an Imami, Shi'i, by default, everyone's reliable. Asalatul adala. And this is not just something that Al-Allam al-Hilli accepted, but other scholars of his time, they accepted as well. However, we humbly disagree with the Sayyid al-Khoi. After studying and examining the works of Al-Allam al-Hilli, specifically his book on Rijal called Khulasat al-Aqwal, the summary of opinions, fi ilm al-Rijal. In his introduction, he clearly states that I divided my books into two sections. The first section is on the thuqat, those that I know they are reliable. There's enough proof and evidence to say they are reliable. The second section is for those that are unreliable. We know for a fact they're unreliable because so-and-so told us they either lie or they forge and fabricate narrations. Or he says, I left the second section for those that either are definitely unreliable or we don't know. We don't know what the case is with them. Are they reliable or are they not reliable? So we'll just put them in the second section. And practically, although it's not proven that they're unreliable, but practically they're unreliable, meaning that we can't take their narrations. We don't say they're weak. We can't say that their liars are weak, but we can't rely on them. You know, it's just like someone comes and gives you a piece of news, comes and tells you, come and apply for this job. And you don't even know this person. He could be telling the truth, but he could be lying as well. You can't rely on a person that you don't know anything about. And there's no such thing as, by default, everyone tells the truth. Correct? We sense this in our everyday lives. So the same law is applied to the narrators of the Imams, those that transmitted a hadith of the Ahlul Bayt. No one by default is reliable. But no one by default is weak as well. So to say he's reliable, you need proof. To say that they're weak, you need proof. Al-Allam al-Hilli clearly, he doesn't state that everyone by default is reliable. For example, he says in page number 1 of Khulasat al-Aqwal, he says, وَلَمْ نُطِلِ الْكِتَابِ بِذِكْرِ جَمِيعِ الرُّوَاةِ بَلْ اقْتَصَرْنَا عَلَى قِسْمَيْنِ مِنْهُمْ. He says, I don't mean to mention all of the narrators because that would make it a long book, but I'm only going to mention two types. وَهُمُ الَّذِينَ أَعْتَمِدُ عَلَى رَوَايَتِهِمْ, those that I rely upon and deem as reliable. وَالَّذِينَ أَتْوَقَّفُ عَنِ الْعَمَلِ بِنَقْلِهِمْ, and those that I will not take their narrations. Why? إِمَّا لِضَعْفِهِ, because I know he's weak. أو لاختلاف الجماعة في توثيقه وتضعيفه, or because there's a difference of opinion. Some say he's reliable, some say he's not reliable. Because of this contradiction in views towards him, I'm not going to narrate. أو لكونه مجهولا عندي, or because I simply don't know anything about him. Simply, we don't know anything about him. No one has told us anything. Najashi hasn't said anything. Tusi hasn't said anything. So this clearly shows that those who are unknown are not by default reliable. While Sayyid al-Khoi says that according to Allam al-Hilli, by default, he considers everyone as reliable, and hence we cannot rely on the expertise of Al-Allam al-Hilli. So this is clearly wrong. And I'll mention an example of how Sayyid al-Khoi assumes that Al-Allam al-Hilli relies on this law of by default everyone's reliable. So in his entry on Ibrahim ibn Hashim, Ibrahim ibn Hashim is the father of Ali ibn Ibrahim al-Qummi, the author of Tafsir al-Qummi, very well known, and we will talk about him later on in our lessons, perhaps in the next episode or the episode after that. Ibrahim ibn Hashim, although he has thousands of narrations, he has He has over 6,000 or 7,000 narrations. But no one has said anything about him. No one has said that he's reliable, and no one has said that he's unreliable explicitly. However, former scholars of Rijal have said that he was the first person to spread the narrations of Kufa and Qom, because he migrated from Kufa to Qom. Qom and Kufa, there were two different schools of thought, although they were both Shi'i Imamis. But they had different styles, different approaches. For example, in Kufa and Baghdad, they viewed the Imams very greatly. They attributed to them, certain qualities that in Qom, those qualities would be deemed as ghulu. It would be deemed as exceeding the limit. And in Qom, they were very strict with narrations. Who narrates? Who do you rely on? Right? If they see someone weak narrating traditions, they would kick him out of Qom. In fact, they would kick certain individuals out of Qom if he relied on weak traditions or weak narrators. Not that he himself was weak. He could be very reliable. But if he were to rely on weak transmitters, they would kick him out of Qom. Just like they did with Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Khalid al-Barqi, the author of Al-Mahasin. He was kicked out of Qom. Why? Because he relied on weak narrators. Ibrahim ibn Hashim migrated from Kufa to Qom, and he spread the narrations of Kufa and Qom. نشر أحاديث الكوفيين في قم, meaning he told hundreds, if not thousands, of narrations. The people of Qom, the scholars of Qom, who were very strict when it came to Rijal, if they saw that Ibrahim ibn Hashim was unreliable, would they have allowed him to stay in Qom? Would they have not said that he's weak or he's unreliable? Definitely, they would have said something. So Al-Allam Al-Hilli, after he mentions all of this, he says he spread the narrations of Kufa and Qom. But I haven't seen anyone that explicitly says he's reliable, nor have I seen anyone that explicitly says that he's unreliable. But at the end of the day, I'm going to accept him. I'm going to accept his traditions. Sayyid al-Khoi and others, they say, see, that means he relies on this law of by default, everyone's reliable. Because he's saying, Ibrahim ibn Hashim, there's no explicit authentication for him, nor is there an explicit unauthentication for him. So I'm going to take him. As long as he's an imami, I'm going to rely on him. But truth be told, that's not the case of why Allam al-Hilli is relying on Ibrahim ibn Hashim. Because Ibrahim ibn Hashim does not need an explicit authentication. Because he's telling us that he went to Qom and spread the narrations of Kufa and Qom. That in itself is a sign that he was someone reliable. If he was someone unreliable, they would have kicked him out of Qom. Or some of the scholars of Qom would have said he's unreliable, he's weak, he's a liar, or so on and so forth. So, in fact, this entry of Ibrahim ibn Hashim proves to us that he does not consider everyone by default as reliable. On the contrary, he looks for signs of authentications. Now, with this, we end that chapter on Al-Allam Al-Hilli and the later scholars of Rijal. Now, I'd like to begin a new section, and this is a section. That I, in my book, what I called is Al-Tawthiqat Al-Amma, mass authentications. Now, what do we mean by mass authentications? This is very important, and then we'll go into the examples of mass authentications. You see, sometimes you could someone asks you, for example, what's your view of this individual or that individual? You say this individual is reliable. That individual is reliable. These are individual authentications. Sometimes, no, you give a mass authentication. You say the family of so-and-so, they are all reliable. They are all trustworthy. They all speak the truth. This is mass authentication. The difference between an individual authentication and a mass authentication is that in an individual authentication, you need to go one by one and say he's authentic, he's reliable, he's not reliable. But with the mass authentication, for example, someone says that this family are all reliable, and this family has 50 members or 60 members. That's it. With one statement, with one sentence, you were able to authenticate 50 individuals, 60 individuals. So this is huge. This is called التوثيقات العامة. In علم الرجال, we call this التوثيقات العامة. This theory, it developed later on. It didn't exist with the former scholars of Rijal, like Al-Tusi and Al-Najashi. We don't see them discussing mass authentications. Maybe there's a couple of signs here and there. But mass authentications, the mass authentications began to develop the theory of mass authentications. Otherwise, they existed. The evidence for mass authentications existed. But our scholars did not pay attention to mass authentications until later on. Maybe, perhaps, with Al-Hurr Al-Amili, the author of Wasa'il Al-Shia. It was up till his time and after that where mass authentications began to develop. Perhaps there were signs of mass authentications. Maybe there were others that paid attention to mass authentications, but on a limited scale, as we shall see. Maybe on a limited scale. But it was during Al-Hurr Al-Amili's time where scholars really began to pay attention to mass authentications, and these mass authentications, they played a major role in Ilm al-Rijal. In fact, I could say that one of the major highlights of the principles to Ilm al-Rijal, to Rijal studies, is mass authentications. This is one of the greatest benefits, or maybe the greatest benefit of studying Ilm al-Rijal, or the principles to Ilm al-Rijal, is to learn about mass authentications, how to authenticate a group of narrators at one time with one statement. And we shall see how. Because that will save a lot of time, and it will save you a lot of effort, and there's a lot of blessings in a mass authentication. Within, from one statement, you can authenticate 400 individuals, 300 individuals, 200 individuals. So that is why it's very important to study mass authentications. And the reason is that scholars are divided on the issue of mass authentications. And these mass authentications, there's various kinds. And you might accept one kind and reject the other, as we shall see. So it's not that if you accept one mass authentication, you're going to have to accept all the others. No, it's not that case. The case is not like that. You have to go through one by one and see, are they legitimate or are they not legitimate? And it makes a world of a difference. Because if you accept one mass authentication or you don't, that's going to make a world of a difference for you. Because if you do, you're going to consider maybe 300 narrators as reliable. If you don't accept that mass authentication, 300 narrators are not going to be authentic for you. So it makes a world of a difference. We will begin with Kamil al-Ziyara by Ibn Qawlawayh, Ja'far ibn Muhammad ibn Qawlawayh. Al-Qummi. Kamil al-Ziyarah is one of our oldest books on ziyarat and on the rewards for ziyarah. For example, the ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. The narrations regarding his visitation, his ziyarah, the prophets that came to visit the grave of, or the land of Karbala, obviously before the martyrdom of Imam Hussein. What is the reward for coming to Karbala? What are the adab and etiquettes of coming for ziyarah? You will find it in this book, Kamil al-Ziyarah. The author is Ja'far ibn Muhammad ibn Qawlawayh al-Qummi, a very respected, a highly respected individual, a highly respected scholar, and you can tell what how highly respected is by knowing that he's a teacher of Sheikh al-Mufid. Sheikh al-Mufid was his student. And if you look at his biography in Al-Najashi's Book of Rijal, Sheikh al-Tusi's Book of Rijal, and others, you will see that he's been praised greatly. Now, Ibn Qawlawayh, in his book Kamil al-Ziyarah, in his introduction, he mentioned something which can be understood as a mass authentication. He says, وقد علمنا أننا لا نحيط بجميع ما روي عنهم في هذا المعنى ولا في غيره. He says, I know that I cannot collect all of the narrations that have been said by the Ahlul Bayt on this topic, meaning ziyarah. However, ولكن ما وقع لنا من جهة الثقات من أصحابنا رحمهم الله برحمته. However, I was able to collect the narrations from the reliable narrators. عن جهة الثقات من أصحابنا. من جهة الثقات من أصحابنا. I was able to collect the narrations of those who are reliable and trustworthy of our companions, or from our companions. So what is he trying to say? It seems like he's trying to say that everything in my book has been narrated from those who are reliable. And then he says, وَلَا أَخْرَجْتُ. But the problem is in the second line. He says, وَلَا أَخْرَجْتُ فِيهِ حَدِيثًا رُوِيَ عَنِ الشِّذَاذِ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ. And I did not narrate anything in my book that is from the weak, shidadh min al-rijal, the narrators that are weak, or you could say, they're abnormal narrators. يؤثر ذلك عنهم عن المذكورين. He says the narrations that have been narrated by them, I will not narrate. غير المعروفين بالرواية المشهورين بالحديث والعلم. Unless those who are known for ilm, for knowledge, those that are popular for being scholars of hadith and riwayah, those who are known for narrating narrations. In other words, he says, I couldn't narrate all the narrations in my book, so I narrated the narrations that are narrated by the reliable sources, and I did not rely on weak narrators, any narration that has been narrated by the weak narrations, and those that are not narrated by the scholars of hadith, the scholars of riwayah. Now this excerpt is very vague, and in fact the different manuscripts of Kamil al-Ziyarah, they're different, they vary regarding this statement, and that variety, it makes a difference in what he's trying to say. Here there are three opinions, and I will mention the opinions and we'll stop here and then we'll continue in another episode, inshallah. There are three major opinions when it comes to Kamil al-Ziyarah. The first opinion says that Ibn Qawlawayh al-Qummi, in this introduction, he was trying to authenticate all of the narrators in his book. Because his book is basically a compilation of narrations, right? It's a compilation of narrations. And it has been said that he has mentioned the names of 388 individuals in his book. The narrators of his book are 388. For example, he says, وَرَوَى فُلَانٌ عَنْ فُلَانٌ عَنْ فُلَانٌ عَنْ فُلَانٌ عَنْ الإمام الصادق. And this individual, and so individual has narrated on the authority of so-and-so, on the authority of so-and-so, on the authority of Imam Sadiq. So each narration maybe has 3 individuals or 4 individuals that he lists. The first opinion says that he's trying to authenticate all of them. He's trying to say that all of them are credible. And this was the opinion of Sayyid al-Khoi for a certain period of time. Sayyid al-Khoi believed that Ibn Qawlawayh, in his book Kamil al-Ziyarah, he was authenticating all of the narrators. All 388 individuals. This is a major deal. Why? Because this means 388 individuals do not need individual authentications. That's it. We consider them as reliable. 388 individuals are considered reliable by Sayyid al-Khoi. This was an opinion that he held for a certain amount of time. For a period of his life, he believed in this. The second opinion says that no, Ibn Qawlawayh is only authenticating his teachers, those who he narrates directly from. When he says Rawa Fulan, that individual, the first individual that he narrates from, is authentic. But when he says An Fulan, no, those are not. He's not looking at those individuals. He's only looking at his teachers, those whom he narrated from. And those individuals are approximately 30. And this too is the opinion of Sayyid al-Khoi. He changed. He first believed that Ibn Qawlawayh had a mass authentication for all of his narrators, all 388. And then towards the end of his life, he changed his opinion and he says, no, the mass authentication is only for his teachers, only about 30 individuals. The third opinion says neither. He's neither authenticating all of the narrators, nor is he authenticating his teachers. Ibn Qawlawayh is trying to say something else. And we shall see. He's neither authenticating his teachers nor all of his narrators. And this is the opinion of Sayyid al-Sistani, hafidhullah, and his son Sayyid Muhammad Rida, my respected teacher, and the opinion of a Shaykh Asif Muhsini, a contemporary scholar of Rijal. Now, what is the proof and evidence for each of these 3 opinions? This is what we shall talk about in the next episode, inshaAllah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.